All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our afternoon panel of the Digital Scholarship Symposium titled Digital Pedagogy, Expanding Digital Literacy and Creativity in the Classroom. As a reminder, just like the morning panel, presenters will be given 10 minutes each to speak, followed by time for questions at the end of all three speakers. So please save your questions for after all three panelists have spoken. Unfortunately, we are missing one of our scheduled panelists today. Chris Hopkins was unable to make it. So depending on how many questions we have at the end, we may be wrapping things up just a little bit early here. But yeah, thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Erin Lane, who is the Digital Liberal Arts Coordinator at Cornell College, where she coordinates with faculty to incorporate digital humanities into their pedagogy. Also a PhD candidate in Spanish literature and culture from the Arizona State University, Erin's research interests include digital humanities, including computational text analysis and mapping, and peninsular literature. Erin's talk is titled Deeper Learning with Digital Humanities.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, just making sure it's on. Thank you for coming to our panel this afternoon. I'm really honored to be here and to speak. Thank you, Olivia, for inviting me. So I'm going to, as a teacher since 2004, I'm going to frame this with kind of the objectives and what I'm going to go over in my talk today. So I'll start off with giving a little background, talking about why digital humanities, or why the digital. I would kind of push back against just the humanities part of that. And then I'll share some different projects that we've done at Cornell, and if there's time, a project that I did with my students at Arizona State and an intro to Hispanic literature course, and then talk about transferable skills. Because digital humanities or digital projects give students a lot of opportunity to learn transferable skills for after they graduate. I will say, just to give you a little bit of background, Cornell College, if you're not aware, is a four-year private liberal arts institution. And we're a little bit unique in that our students take one course at a time, and we call them blocks, for 18 days. So like you're taking Spanish, you're taking only that for 18 days, and then it's over and you transition to the next class. So we approach this in a somewhat different way. There's different challenges than there would be in a semester on a semester plan, but nonetheless, our students come up with some really great projects. So why digital humanities, or why is this important? And I think when we're thinking about being educators and working in education, we want our students to be employable when they leave. We want them to, or be successful in graduate work. So teaching these skills and having them do these kinds of projects, yes, they can be fun. Yes, technology is fun to incorporate into pedagogy, but really bigger than that, it helps them do things like develop soft skills, fosters creativity, allows them to see different types of scholarship that they might not have seen, which can prepare them for graduate research when they go on, if they do. It allows them to interact with content in different ways, and a big one, helps them to develop critical thinking skills. So those are kind of my why behind it, some of them, and I'll kind of start off with that. So one of the first project that I want to share with you came out of a second year seminar class. All of our sophomores take a different second year seminar at the beginning of their sophomore year. And this one was created by our art professor, Susanna Biondo Jamel. And hers is kind of a spinoff of the AIDS Memorial Quilt, if you've ever seen that. They've created a really awesome archive and website, and she wanted to do something similar. So we used Google Sites, which is very basic website design, to create a digital interactive quilt for her students. And what they did was they chose some sort of topic that they felt passionate about and they could do research on, and they created an actual physical quilt block with fabric and different materials to represent that idea. And then they took pictures of it, they reflected on it, and we taught them how to record and edit audio so that they had kind of a podcast or an audio version of that reflection, and all of those things were put onto the website. So this is the third year of the website, and if you take a look at these slides, if you click on the picture of that screenshot of the site, it will take you to it. And all of these little blocks down at the bottom, the captioning is kind of covering them up, but all the blocks at the bottom, you just click on those and they take you to the student's work. So it's a really neat project. And it was interesting to see all of the different topics that they researched, and our subject librarians also worked with them as well. So it was a really collaborative project with lots of different stakeholders. The next project that I'd like to share, there's two of them actually. And one's kind of a combination, a hybrid project that came out of two different classes. We do a lot with podcasting. We actually have, although we have a really small space, we have a 4-person podcasting setup with a nice soundboard. And then we have expanded, and this year we have a little podcasting booth with 2 microphones and a soundboard. And that has become very popular in a lot of our classes. And 2 projects that I really am proud of the students for what they came up with were these 2. The first one was from 3 years ago when I first started at Cornell. In their English senior seminar, it was a group of 4 students created a podcast called Exposing Your High School Reading List. And they sat down and they recorded their audio and created a podcast with several episodes. They continued it even after the class, which was really neat to see, and then posted it online. And looked really critically at what books are being chosen for high school reading and why are those, maybe some of those, problematic. And so it was really neat to see that project. And then they would put it out on social media. You'd see that they dropped a new episode, and they kind of all went their separate ways after graduation, so it didn't continue, but it was a really neat project. And I was proud of how they kept it going, at least through the academic year. And then the next project, a student named Jack Carlson, who actually works in our academic technology studio. As a freshman, he took a kinesiology class where they created a podcast. They created podcasts about kind of sports journalism. And from that, he has created what he calls the Hilltop Sports Report. And he's become an announcer for the athletics department. And he creates a periodic podcast that he puts out on YouTube and on social media as well for our athletics department. So that's been really, really cool. He also took an intro to multimedia writing class with Dr. Katie Sagal, and they worked with WordPress, and he made kind of a companion site with some other students that went along with that podcast. And I'm especially proud of him because after his freshman year, this young man is like amazing. He turned that into a work opportunity in the summer, and he got a job with a radio station. He's originally from West Virginia that covers West Virginia athletics. And then he became the station manager that summer as they had an opening. So I know that he is going to do some great things in the future. And some of that came from doing digital humanities projects, which is really neat. We do a lot of different digital storytelling projects with our students, with our classes. So some of those would be ArcGIS story maps, all kinds of video production like explainer videos, video essays. As you can imagine, in 18 days, it's hard to get a very complex video, but we do it on a smaller scale. And that's kind of what we focus on. Animated videos, we've had some of those in classics classes. And this project came out of a class called Public Memory with Dr. Katie Stewart. And they read a book about African-American history in the United States. And then they took the things that they learned in that book and made ArcGIS story maps. And they specifically looked at geolocation in different places in the US where they could map and show how those places were important. One of them, I believe, had to do with Angola Prison, which I think is in Louisiana, and different cemeteries in the South and things like that. So that was a really neat project. And as you can see, we created a collection, and there are 6 story maps from 6 different groups. So that was another one. And then finally, a project that I did with my Spanish 325 Intro to Hispanic Literature class. We learned a lot about different movements in Spanish literature over time and authors, and we heard about places, and I wanted them to try to connect to those things and to see how location and place and also historical events and time really not affect, really influence what people write, why they wrote what they did, how they wrote. And so we did a collaborative timeline and mapping project. We used Timeline JS from Night Lab to create the timeline, and then we used Google Maps for the mapping. And then this was a quote from some feedback that I got from one of my students about it, how she thought that it kind of maybe filled in some of the gaps that they didn't get through the discussion and through the assignments and things like that. And so finally, really why and what can students get out of digital humanities? These are some of the things. Obviously, it's not an all-encompassing list, but we teach them critical thinking. They learn digital data visualization in some settings, problem solving. Obviously, they're learning to research. They learn digital literacy, which is incredibly important today. Collaboration, interpersonal communication, graphic design, writing and editing, and project management are just a few. So thank you for your attention and thanks for listening.
Our second talk is going to be by Lindsay Wede, the Ames High School Art Department Liaison. Lindsay teaches art classes at Ames High School. Prior to coming to Ames, she taught at Burnside and Perry. Lindsay is the Art Department Liaison and sponsors AHS Art Club and National Art Honor Society, rather. In addition, Lindsay is co-coordinator for Iowa All-State Art. She also runs Pin Sprints. Lindsay's talk is titled Make Positive Impacts on Your Community with Art.
Hello, thank you for having me. As I was just talking to Michael, I am really incredibly proud of our program. And so I just want to share some of the things that we do. These are some of the things that I just live by and I try and encourage my students all the time. So be the change you want to see in the world, make things meaningful, use our gifts to make gifts, go beyond the grade, and intelligence plus character, that is actually the true goal of education. Some of the goals I have with my students is helping them grow and show their growth. I want to help my students make connections. I wanted to share a bunch of stuff, but we don't have enough time. So I'm just going to point out a few things. We do like a get to know you video at the very start of our 4D animation class. And I let them use whatever platform they want to early on, because then they can show me what they already know. Heidi's video is one I would share if we had plenty of time, but her About You poem, she continually says, I am an artist. And then she demonstrates some of the things that she does, and it's beautiful. We also create inspirational cards. So we've done this the last couple of years and our entire school uses these now. So the students start by pen and pencil. This is the best way to kind of develop ideas to begin with. And then we make these digital. And so this creates a clear ownership and sense of community. And then our graphic design students have made them digital. So we created these postcards digitally, and our goal is to hit all of our students by sending them cards home. So every few months, every teacher sends 3 to 6 cards to a student at home. And then we check off of our spreadsheet to make sure that every student is getting a card. Okay, so I encourage to create meaningful work. We try to find avenues to connect and share with others. I want to make it matter, and I definitely want them to believe in what they do. Making friends and partnerships. This is another partnership we do. We actually meet with elementary kids. This is maybe one of my favorite things we do. It's actually coming up this semester again soon. Next week, we'll go over there. And so I take my graphic design students over to the elementary, and they get paired up with a student that ends up telling them how to make their work digitally. So they end up making a story together. So they meet 3 times. They plan, they produce, and then they reflect, and they get to see each other's spaces. So we go to the elementary, and then the elementary students come to us and see what we have done. And so it's really neat for those students to create those connections and bring their digital works to life. So they share their work. I love that they stay connected. My favorite part of this whole thing is actually walking over with those high schoolers and then walking back with them after the first time they meet those elementary kids again, because it's like it reminds them, hey, I loved school. I played on that playground, or I played on a different playground. Wherever they came from, they remind themselves of, oh, I actually really had a good school experience, and it brings them back to that, whether they like school or not at this stage. Another project we do is a memory project. This connects us to kids abroad. So I've gotten connected with Ben Schumacher out of Wisconsin, and he helps set us up with several different countries. So over the several past years, we've been connected with all of these different countries, and my students make portraits. So this is one of the portraits that one of our students has done. And every year, more kids participate. It's actually, we've had to increase our gathering of supplies and information to get more and more kids participating. So Umpio actually did both of these portraits. And then this is displayed at our public library. I absolutely love our Ames Public Library. So yeah, so if you don't go there, please do go there. It's amazing. This is a vegetable. And so I just wanted to point out how that has connected us as well. And then we've been connected with refugees from Ukraine as part of this. And then this in turn inspired a project that we wanted to do more locally. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. And so we started to do portraits for patients. And so we actually connected with a hospice house that's here in town. And Pat brings over pictures from families that decide that they would maybe like the person that they have in hospice to be drawn or something like that. So we limit it to them maybe doing one person and their pet or a person and their family member. So we don't end up with an entire family photo to end up doing, but the students get this as a project. And so Pat just comes to us as people request it. So I had a student create this flyer so that can be shared with families. And sometimes this is completely anonymous. We try and make it so that you don't know who the patient is, because that's supposed to be kept under HIPAA. So our nurses actually come and talk to the students about that. And this is one situation that we could share, because Krisha actually met with the person that requested the portrait, and they actually have met several times since and have an ongoing friendship now, which is pretty awesome. He's asked her to do more portraits too. Sometimes they send a simple thank you. It's definitely a sensitive time for any family. So we don't expect anything in return. We always tell the students, you're doing this just out of selfless doing this. I also wanted to point out some other connections we've had. So Unsung Heroes, this is an artifact project that's nationwide. They do images of unsung heroes. So actually I have some drawing, painting, printmaking students working on this now. Ella Grayle actually won an award for her Unsung Hero project on Cheyenne Web. She was the youngest freedom fighter. So the students learn about these people. This is another way. And then they add them to their portfolios. So I added at the top. So this is Ella Grayle. This is part of her portfolio. And I wanted to talk a little bit about online portfolios, because this is a huge component in our program that I'm incredibly proud of. Our online portfolios have several benefits. Students showcase their own work. Portfolios give a way to share their art beyond the classroom. The portfolios provide a system for keeping track of their work and growth, because they continually add to them. The portfolios provide another way to make connections with the community. Students have the ability to morph their portfolios to changing needs. So even when they graduate, they can decide what they want to do with them. They always have these. These are accessible to them forever. And students can track artists to follow. So every class that they take, they have to find 3 new current artists, showing that artists are still living, still working today, and add that to their portfolio. And students can continually build on these for years to come. So here's just a couple screenshots of some, because I wanted to show you a whole bunch, but I was like, I don't have time. So this is Taya Franz, and I love how she set hers up. This is one example, because she always showed her work before. So she shows her like brainstorming that she did in class as well beyond the final product. So this is actually a license plate design contest that's going on right now, which I'm really excited about too, because you could potentially get this license plate once they're decided later in May. So Julia's, I added hers on here. Julia has taken several different art classes. I wanted to point out we do like text portraits and graphic design, collages, mandalas, and this is just another way of how hers is set up, because everyone's is different. They have a clearly homepage and different pages on their portfolios. Students can also showcase what they learn and teach other people. So John Dirks has done this with a how to do stop motion animation that he created. And then I wanted to show you some of the requirements that we do ask for within the portfolio. So they have to have an artist statement about themselves, and we give them like a flow chart to include the things that they need to include in that. They have to include a piece of their favorite artwork on that homepage and a portrait of themselves. Then they have their best projects from the class with titles and sizes on their next page, and then artists to follow in the content area and art history that they've done. So each of these pages they might build on if they take a different class. We're really special in that we have graphic design. I can have a graphic design student every single year for every semester, and they could go through 8 levels of graphic design, or they can go through 8 levels of photography. So it depends. Some take a lot of different, like some might take photography, 3D, and then 2D, and add to that. So all their portfolios kind of morph as they take different classes. And then their 4th page, they get to add individual work, because we want them to understand that they are the artists with their choices, and so they can add individual work that they put on there, and they need to show an understanding of their elements and principles of art. And then I have links to a whole bunch of different ones here that I was like, oh, if I could click through them all, I would, because I'm really proud of these kids. And I could add more on there, but obviously we don't have time. So I just took some screenshots and get some other things to point out. I asked these kids, these were the ones I wanted to be like, can I share your portfolio at this? And of course, they're super proud of their work too. Like, so Juniper Eve Marshall, look out for this girl. She's amazing. She is definitely a storyteller. She's working on a graphic novel. That's awesome. She's in my animation class and now is a level 3 animator, and she has learned so much and it's just doing great stuff. So I love her kind of heading there. Julia's work here, she is primarily taking photography. So as you can see with her camera and her picture there, and I just wanted to show you kind of what their mini artist statement. So every semester they might change that a little bit, right? Because it morphs, they grow up, they change, they decide certain things they like a little bit differently. So I wanted to point out just a couple of digital literacy things. And these are definitions that I think you already know, but I want to pinpoint how we use them in different things. So functional skills. How do I use this program? AHS art students are learning new programs to make them more versatile and flexible in their future careers. So we try to explore them to Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, Animate, Blender, Unity. We look at free programs to explore them to. Whatever program they're learning is obviously going to help them when they try and learn another new program, because they'll see connections and they'll decide, oh, I have more functional skills. So here's part of a digital portfolio where they're just showing some of the tutorials that they went through and what they learned, and then how they actually turned those into their own videos. And then this is June's stamps. She did her own stamp design. So that's one of our assignments in graphic design. And then creativity. No portfolio looks the same. Every children's book page is different. Positive Notes Home, the kids that designed those, none of them look the same. So there are always guidelines and instruction, but always choice involved. This I love. I really wanted to show you Ellie Phillips' work. She is also a girl to look out for because she has designed this typography. So this is an assignment in graphic design, and I think it would look great in any nursery. So if you're looking for those types of items, she's also gone on to make more things related to like children's education because she wants to be a teacher. So how great is this that she could use this? Here's the same assignment from a different student. So you can see like a different kind of variation that she did. So hers was more related to bears. This is teas. And what she talked about this project was the one that she liked the most. So they always have to do reflections on that. Critical thinking, remembering that there's not always just one right answer. And so here is, again, back to Juniper's kind of idea. So I talked a little bit about her graphic novel. She's making a summer pants video and developing her character sketches. Thank you. And asked her, oh shoot, and I ran out of time, didn't I? Oh, I didn't get a warning. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, I'll click through. Can I click through real quick? Is that all right? Okay, perfect. Okay, so Aster's, this is Aster. So I wanted to point out that we add traditional medium in here too. So Aster's drawing, her doodles, and then cultural and social understanding. So students get to pick the artist to which they represent their interest to follow. So the 3 current artists to follow, they find people that they find similarities to. So here's just a couple examples of how they put that up on their screen and added links to them. And then collaboration. Students learn to work with each other inside and outside the classroom. We do something called PATS, where they praise, ask questions, and tell what stuck out or suggest improvements. And here's another example of like part of the children's book page and text portrait. Oh, and then the Our Story. So I do want to put that out. So that was a cover page that Saya created for Our Stories for this year. I thought she did an awesome job of that. And then the ability to find and select information. So we want to make sure that they're understanding how to look for information, how to develop their theories and ideas, making packages designs, and then effective communication. So figuring out how they can communicate what they've learned. I'll try to go faster. And then reflections. What's your best class and thinking of best class and why? And safety. So we always say put your best foot forward, right? So put your best digital footprint forward. I feel like there's can be so much negative out there that it'd be nice to add as much positive to the world that we can. And then I have another video that I really don't have enough time for, but a video to STEAM night that they promoted for the preschool. And then they're creating things for conferences. We're trying to give them as much real life experience as possible. And I love this. It's an advertisement from graphic design where it's like, don't moan about braces, Invisalign. I want them to pick it up. And then advertising their work. So this is one of the reasons why students wanted to share their stuff too. They're like, Ella Gray was like, oh, I would love to have some more of my work sold. So having people see their accomplishments, they put out what they've learned and earned. And so I think that's awesome. And then they can just have fun with things too and meet their target goals. Last but not least, Karina Scott is actually an art club leader now at ISU. And she was one of our art club leaders last year at Ames High. And so I'm super proud of her too. We do the Mary Greeley ceiling tiles. We're always looking for new places to do things. So I wanted to throw it back out there at you. If you have ideas for what Ames High can do, we would love to hear it. Okay, sorry I took more time.
All right, our third and final talk this afternoon is by Erin Ridnour, a digital scholarship librarian at Iowa State University Library. She partners with students, faculty, and staff on digital projects, teaches workshops and class sessions on geospatial humanities, text analysis, and digital storytelling, and facilitates a variety of programs in the library's collaborative digital scholarship space, The Catalyst, where we all are right now. Erin's talk is titled Computers Reading Cookbooks, Exploring the Iowa Community Cookbook Collection with Natural Language Processing.
Great. Thank you all. Again, thank you all for being here and thank you for allowing me to talk today. I'm going to talk about a project that is currently ongoing that I began working on last summer. So very, very much a work in progress. The project is called Computers Reading Cookbooks. It's a collections as data project that utilizes a selection of a very large collection from ISU Library, general collection and special collections of Iowa cookbooks as a corpus for text analysis and natural language processing. So the overall project has several objectives. The first two are kind of my own personal research interests. So through this collection of specifically community cookbooks, I'm hoping to identify groupings of similar recipes that can reveal this kind of shared food culture among Iowa communities, and also see kind of a shift over time in what that food culture looked like, but also to identify recipes that are unique to particular communities and that might highlight some ethnic and cultural differences and histories in Iowa that you may not be able to find otherwise. So those are two kind of personal research interests of mine. The third one is what I'm going to focus most on for this panel about pedagogy, which is that we're hoping to develop through developing this corpus, a text analysis workflow and set of teaching materials for use in digital humanities boot camps or workshop series or graduate fellowships here on campus. So far, our department has offered an introduction to text analysis workshop that's about an hour and 15 minutes long. We can really just get into the basics of some key methodologies in text analysis, do a little bit of exploration in Voyant, and that's about it in that time frame. So what I'm hoping for here is to develop a much longer deep dive into text analysis using this important collection from here at our library. So I'll just take you through some of the steps of text analysis that we're hoping to highlight in developing these curriculum materials. So first is, how do you build a corpus? How do you make selections to create a data set that's going to reveal what you're hoping to reveal in your research? So here in the community cookbooks data set that I'm developing, the larger cookbook collection includes other things other than community cookbooks, like industry ingredients that were created here in Iowa. They developed cookbooks, statewide compilations. The governor's office puts out a cookbook for Terrace Hill. But I'm focused mostly on just the community organizations. So cookbooks produced by churches, cooperatives, special interest groups, either formal or informal. I'm not looking at single author publications. I'm not looking at family collections, and nothing statewide. So I'm really trying to focus on these kind of well-defined communities, and then no ingredient specific corporate publications. I'm focusing on publishing 2009 or earlier. I'm hoping that that will alleviate any issues with people still wanting to sell their cookbook, because most of these cookbooks were created as fundraisers for the organization. And then so far for this kind of like test phase of the project, the corpus is 200 cookbooks, with the goal of hopefully expanding that to a larger data set in the future. So after you've selected the text that you want in your corpus, the next step is to make them digital or machine readable so that you can do something with them. So part of that is choosing an appropriate OCR engine or optical character recognition to convert the digital images to machine readable text. And I'm focusing, I've been testing two different OCR engines. One is Tesseract, which is an open source product, but it is command line only. So there's a little bit of barrier to use there. It is also trainable, meaning that you can input data to help it identify characters better over time, but it requires a lot of data and a lot of time. Abby FineReader is a paid license product. It is a little bit expensive, but it has a graphical user interface, so it's a little easier for users to use. And it's also a little bit easier to train because you can kind of identify an error right there on the screen and train it to see that better. The reason that I'm using Tesseract at all is because it is open source, it is free, and it's something that students would have access to on their own. So I think it would be something that we would use in our workshops. So here you can see, I would say Tesseract and Abby FineReader do different things well and different things worse from each other. So this is the original image here. You can see it has this kind of diagonal slant to the words, and Tesseract and Abby FineReader handle this in different ways. Tesseract across the top of the image has attempted to transcribe the border of the image. That's what all these weird characters on top and bottom. And then Abby FineReader attempted to preserve that slant with these pipe characters and kind of funny characters along the edge. So you have to do a little cleanup with either one, but this is an example of what some just raw OCR looks like with both of these engines. So after you've chosen your corpus, after you've OCR'd all of your text, I also like to emphasize for students that close reading of your corpus is still really important. So even if you're going to be doing computational analysis, you are going to have better research questions if you know the text in your corpus before throwing them into the computer. So in this case with these cookbooks, that's just meant me flipping through and reading. And as you flip through more cookbooks, you start to notice patterns. You start to, keep notes of what you want to see if the text analysis program will pick up on some of these things that you're anecdotally noticing as you look through. What I threw up here was just kind of some of the grossest options that I found. So I think this is what you notice first, like, oh, wow, those are frosted liver log and flank steak banana stuffing. And but something that you could work through with the students is as you look at more and more of these cookbooks, you can see evidence of some of these larger social and cultural influences on the local cuisine. So I have here Perfection salad is the well-known name of this very common recipe from the early 20th century domestic science movement. And all of these are different titles for roughly the same thing: lemon jello, cabbage, shredded carrots, vinegar, maybe olives, maybe celery, some other things, but in a jello mold. So you can also find evidence of the Great Depression and World War II in these cookbooks, not just around that era, but continuing on later into later decades. Cakes made out of Campbell soup of various kinds. Fruit cocktail cake is one that's very popular. So adding other ingredients to make up for food shortages and rationing during these times. And then you can also see evidence of different ethnic and cultural food traditions on these kind of more mainstream cookbooks. One of these is the influence and popularity of Asian and Polynesian cuisines. So a lot of kind of adapted Chinese restaurants all throughout the 20th, or Chinese dishes all throughout the 20th century. And also particularly in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you see that evidence of the popularity of Polynesian cuisine with the opening of and expansion of Trader Vic's restaurants. So a lot of things for the students to explore there just in the close reading stage. The next stage is using a product called Voyant Tools. So Voyant Tools is an open source environment that you can use right in the browser. It handles a variety of text formats. And I like it for teaching because when you throw your text into the program, you get this right away. Like, wow, I can start analyzing these texts immediately. And one of the things that I like to do first is to use some of the most basic visualizations in Voyant to start identifying and investigating things that don't look quite right. So one of those things here What we have across the top is just the default top 5 words in this corpus. This is the first 25 cookbooks that we've digitized. And we see that sugar and salt are really high in this one cookbook. This is like, oh, that's kind of weird. And it turns out that that whole cookbook is cookie recipes. So it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But then also along here, you see that teaspoon spelled TSP there are 0 in all of these. So it's like, oh, weird, no teaspoons. But it turns out that they're spelling it completely out in those. So sometimes it's a really simple answer, but this will highlight for you what you need to look into a little further. Another example of this is sugar. This is in the first 100 cookbooks. Sugar is absolutely 0 in this one. That can't be. It's a cookbook. It turns out that the OCR is complete gibberish for this cookbook. So this is something that I need to look into further for text cleaning and maybe redo that one. Voyant has a couple other tools, named entity recognition and also finding collocates, so co-occurring words. And then the final step I'll talk about here quickly is to actually dive into this corpus using Python and Jupyter Notebook. So this is the part that's really still under development for me. I'm really trying to understand what parts of this I want to highlight in a workshop, and also what parts of this are useful for my own research. So for the purposes of workshops, I think honing in on the pre-processing steps that you can do with Python. So lowercasing your entire corpus, stripping it of punctuation, and tokenizing or lemmatizing the words so that you can start doing that kind of computational analysis with it. Some of the other things that I'm using to identify those clusters of common recipes or outlier recipes is to explore different document similarity measures, and also compare documents using different like clustering and visualization methods to pull out which ones are clustering together as more similar and which ones are kind of outliers. So here's a couple like very first tries at the clustering methods. 2 different methods here with the first 25 cookbooks. And then this is the first 100 cookbooks. So this method is not giving me something that I can work with at the moment. So it could be that I need to hone my code here. It could be that that's not the method I should use. But it looks like this one I am starting to get some clusters. And when I start to dig into which text these are, some of these do make sense to me as like clusters of similar books. So that's promising. And as far as work that's still in progress here, the digitization is still ongoing. The OCR is still ongoing throughout the spring semester. Hopefully we'll be done at the end of the spring. And then the rest is continuing to explore when the full corpus is ready, explore with these different steps that I've outlined, and finalize the Jupyter notebooks and documentation for this so that we can start using it in teaching. And then it is my hope to also test out some of these teaching materials by hosting a kind of workshop or hackathon with library staff. So I have a blog. It is not completely up to date right now, but I post there occasionally, and also my contact information. So thank you.
The microphone over to you.
Thank you all. This is fascinating. I love seeing what you're all doing. This isn't really a question. I'm just seeing your text cloud. As an Iowan who definitely has a cookbook like that, seeing sugar in those gigantic letters, I've never felt so simultaneously seen and accused. So thank you for that.
And she is.
This is a question about the Ames High School projects. You mentioned a lot that as they're going through the program and figuring things out, they can update their portfolios. But how do you manage when someone is coming into the high school as a junior or a senior and for the first time getting the sort of art instruction that they might not get at other schools?
So as soon as they come, so every single class that they take, the portfolio is one of their assignments. So at the end of the class, like the last 3 weeks, that's something that they work on. And so I mentioned that you can take several different levels, but even as a new student, so I have a new student coming tomorrow actually from a different school because kids move in and out all the time. So that kid will be looped in on our assignments. And then for their portfolio, clearly they won't have as much extensive as far as the requirements, but they can still do an artist statement. They can still show a portrait of them. They can still show themselves working on their work, and they have a place to start and then continue moving forward.
Hi, I have a question regarding the cookbook and computers. So I once visited the farmhouse museum here. It's here on campus. I think it's the oldest building here. Yes, I think they have a cookbook which is pretty old, like 1,000 years. It is like there are things from like 1,000 years ago. Have you checked on that, and do you plan on keeping those as well in your directory?
I have not. I wasn't aware of the farmhouse cookbook. So far, this is just library collection material. But I think it could be possible to include other materials on campus. Yeah.
I think it's a great resource, and it is available at Iowa State University.
Yeah.
That not many people pay attention to. Like, it has got like really good stuff. They have like the tortoise and stuff that used to be eaten back then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How that affects your pedagogy and what's possible?
Yeah, so like for the online portfolios, for instance, that part I've opened it up for what you can use too, so that kids can use Google Sites like she has mentioned using before too. I also say they can use Wix. They can use Weebly. I've actually used Weebly as far as my own site goes. And so if you leave the Weebly.com, it's still free. So there's tons of free resources in that regards for the websites. And then for tools, because even like when we had COVID happen, we were in the similar boat where kids just have Chromebooks. So within our graphic design class specifically, we do have access to like the Adobe programs, and those are phenomenal, right? But we don't have that for every single kid, and they can't always use that. So there are some other versions, like Photopea is a version of like Photoshop. Granted, it's not as great, but it still is an accessible program. So I'm always looking for like free programs as well for kids to use. Yes. Yes. So like graphic design, we really hone in on certain things and that. Like, so we do like Photoshop and Illustrator, and then like my 4D class, we do Animate, but we also like Blender is free and Unity is free. So I expose them to that. And like I said, with the different levels, it's kind of neat because then students can continually build on those things. And I also, when I did the early video with Heidi, like I mentioned earlier, I let them use whatever platform they already know first, because then I kind of know what they're coming in with, because kids have access to a ton of technology already that they continually inform us too of like, oh, here's a new tool that maybe even I wasn't aware of that they were using. Yeah, you bet.
Erin, at one point, there was a note on one of the PowerPoint slides about not using just ingredient lists. And maybe I misread that. I don't know what it was. But what I'm wondering is, do these cookbooks in the collection have material in them that is not just the recipes? Are there introductions that you're also assessing and stories that go along with some of the recipes?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of the cookbooks are the organization's opportunity to tell their story as well. So they've got kind of this maybe long history at the front of their organization and its membership. And a lot of them will have prayers, to say at the table, or they'll have other types of household tips or, cleaning and tips and things like that. I'm leaving all of that in the corpus. I think it would contribute to whether or not documents are similar or not. And I think it's like an important part of the text to leave in. There are also a lot of illustrations that were usually contributed by community members, these kind of hand illustrations at the beginning of each chapter or highlighting some of the recipes. I'm not able to do much with that right now. I mean, that comes out as just characters in the OCR, but this collection will also be available as a digital collection of image files. And so if someone wanted to do something with some of the other materials that I'm not looking at here, they could do that. Yeah.
I'm curious about the cookbook. So we get communities like Emmitsburg or Pella that have very strong ethnic backgrounds. How does this kind of take that into effect as you're scanning those in?
So something that I'm hoping I can identify through this analysis is the communities that have that still have a very heavy kind of ethnic tradition within the cookbook. So Pella is a good example. There are a lot of communities with heavy Norwegian sections in these cookbooks still, and they will still use the Norwegian name for a lot of the recipes. So part of that comes with the close reading too, to be able to pick out words that I need to be looking for in the larger analysis so that I can kind of type that in and ask it to look for all examples of those. Yeah.
I had a question actually for Erin Lane. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the challenges of integrating digital humanities tools into an 18-day long course where there are a lot of other material to go over as well, and how you overcome those.
So we hope that the faculty will come to us early, but sometimes it's like the first day of the block and we scramble a little bit. We have a lot of faculty that are really dedicated to doing these projects, so those tend to be a little bit easier, but there's a lot of scrambling that goes on. And sometimes we have to know our limitations of like what software is available, what's available within. It's basically me and our science and technology librarian and then our academic technology specialist who go and do demonstrations and classes. So we are a small little crew, and we do work with our research librarians to do kind of the research part of it, and finding good sources and things like that. But it's a lot of planning and being really intentional with the faculty, and being firm sometimes and saying, it needs to be scaffolded this way so that you can get what you want out of it at the end. And also sometimes having to say no. But we try to, I hate to say no to anyone. I even taught a workshop. It didn't go very well because it was last minute, but tried to teach a really last minute thing with a classics class on creating a short animated video. That would have benefited from more planning, but it is definitely, we just try to go as we can and ask for help. And our Center for Teaching and Learning, which we're part of, we have some really great colleagues that also will sometimes take on other tasks so that we have the freedom to be able to go and do demonstrations and things like that. So it's a lot of give and take. Every day is very different, and which I really love. I used to be a high school Spanish teacher, and I feel like I was like tied to that classroom. And so, yeah, just personally, I like that.
I have another question from Erin for Cornell. So you mentioned a couple of different projects where students were doing something as part of a class with the instructor as the coursework, making a podcast or doing another project, and then it continued after the class was over. How do you help distinguish between something that is a course project and something that the students have ownership over and doesn't necessarily have to stay within the course?
Can you say that last part of your, he just walked away with the microphone, of course.
Sort of, how do you help distinguish either for the faculty or for the students the difference between something that is a course project and something that they can have ownership over as the student creators?
I would say that all of the projects that they do, they have some sort of ownership over. And I guess in order for us to share any of that or for that to be public, we have to have their consent because of FERPA. But I don't know. I don't know of any projects that aren't, that they don't attribute themselves to. And maybe that's just the nature of, it's probably the nature of being just an undergraduate. We're not a research one university, so it's different. I think that answered it. Okay, thanks.
This is a question for the whole panel, but I think it was sort of inspired by Erin Lane, you talking about the transferable skills that you're teaching, and so I guess I'm wondering, when you get students in your classes, or maybe Erin, as you're thinking about the workshops that you're going to teach with your material, but for you two, the students that you've had in your classes that come with different technical backgrounds, do you run into frustrations, or how do you plan around, like, oh, this is a pretty difficult thing that I'm asking, or a difficult or complex tool that I'm about to teach? How do you think through the sort of frustration that might come up when students are learning new things, and how do you plan for that, or how will you plan for that?
I think probably my background, like with you having taught secondary education, I kind of take their prior knowledge into account and kind of assume that there's going to be somebody in that class that knows nothing, and realize that their outcomes are going to be somewhat different. So we just did a workshop this week on teaching some extremely basic like HTML tags to a class that's working with WordPress, and there were some students that I had to stand next to and really help them because they could not remember to, put the tag in front of it and include both the chevrons around it, and really take them step by step through it. That's one thing that's really helpful when I have two other people in the classroom with me helping me. So I'm lucky in that way. But I guess, yeah, just kind of assuming there's somebody that knows nothing, and we're not going to get as far with them, but there are other students who we can try to adapt and allow them to kind of go on. Sometimes we'll start the workshop with asking them what kind of background they have. And so we can maybe know who we need to pay a little bit more attention to, and not that we're ignoring the other people, but kind of trying to make sure that everybody gets a basic understanding when we leave that workshop.
Yeah, I agree with you. Prior knowledge is huge. Like those videos that we do in 4D art where they just show me what video knowledge they already know in advance, or like in photography, we have them show us their first photo that they've done. We have them show us in drawing, painting, printmaking, kind of their skills that they have in advance. So that prior knowledge is huge. And then, yeah, there are kids that might show up and not even know how to turn on the power button of the computer. So I even remind my students of that when we have the class, because it's a multi-grade class. So it's 9th through 12th graders. And then since all the levels are together, so like when I say that you can take 8 levels of photography, that means that you might have a level 8 in there with a level 1 student, which is actually pretty awesome, because then they learn too that they can learn from more than just me. So some of those upper level students become like mentors, and that's so great for their experience as well. But yeah, there's some students that you'll have to sit down right next to and really, really help them out. You might have to pull them in extra. They might come in the morning before school or stay after school. They might come during their study hall. It might just take them a little longer to get somewhere. And then you might have to adjust your goals a little bit with those kids. So.
I would say with the text analysis activities I'm planning, and we've done some of this already in the workshops that we've taught, is making sure that we're going to teach the technical skills, but if you don't get all the way through that, or you're not quite understanding that, there's still something set up that you can run that you'll get an immediate reaction from, or you'll be able to see the analysis in action. This is why I really like Voyant as a tool. So I'll be talking them through how to develop a corpus, but then the corpus will already be ready for them to load into Voyant and look at. Once they're in Voyant, there's 5 tools that show up on default. You can immediately see results. And then in the kind of Python activities that we're planning, Python takes a long time to learn. It's a tough thing to teach also, and I haven't taught it before. So this will be a learning experience for me, but teaching some introductory Python and kind of in theory how Python works, but then having the Jupyter notebooks already populated with code that they can run and see a result. So even if they're not fully understanding how Python works, they don't quite get how to write it yet, they can still run the notebook and see in theory what's supposed to happen with it. So I think making sure that there's still a result that they can see, even if they don't fully understand the skills, is really helpful.
Question for each of you. What is the number one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who wants to incorporate a project using a digital tool into the classroom and who's never done something like that before?
Reach out to your resources on campus for help with that, including your friendly librarians and digital scholarship initiatives.
I would say just getting through the project. I'm thinking of like my own personal experience with text analysis. Sometimes we want it to be this great, grand, wonderful thing. And like, I have all of these insights and everything worked out perfectly, and it doesn't work like that. So just doing the process, you learn something from it. You might learn where your shortcomings, like for me, were in being efficient in projects. I've learned a lot of those things and I share those with my students, like creating a podcast. I would want to look for music and then I would spend like 5 days looking at music and I wouldn't get the other stuff done. So, but in that process, I did learn something about, about myself, about my abilities. I learned the process. So I would say it's worth it, even if it doesn't end up being this huge, wonderful legacy project that goes out and is disseminated amongst the academy and things like that. It's still worth it, I think.
Yeah, and technology is always changing, always. So I have to remind myself and my students that we're all lifelong learners in this whole track. And so I'll even bring that up at the start of the semester too, that like, hey, there's a new tool in this program that just came up this last semester. So I'm going to introduce you guys to this, but I also just was learning about it. So I hope I have enough enthusiasm to be interested enough in the stuff myself too, to be practicing it regularly, trying it regularly, and be opening to having a student even show me up on something to be like, hey, Mrs. Wede, check this out. I'll be like, oh, I didn't know that yet. So it's okay to not know something right away. I do feel like the longer I've been doing this, the more of a base I have, that I'm very confident in teaching the kids the programs to start out. But there is sometimes where they take that extra leap and bound and kind of show additional stuff. So did I answer that question okay?
Thank you.
Even like the digital, like collecting, data, that always seems to be an issue. Like, how long do you keep things? Where do you keep things? Can they be found, or students can students access them like afterwards, years afterwards, as part of their own, need it for their resume or portfolio or want to reference it. So how do you manage that, like going into the future?
So I still have students talking to me today about it. Like Sydney Bray is in her second year of college asking about like, oh, I kind of forgot my access to my online portfolio. Can you send that to me? But yeah, they take it with them. They try and back up their stuff. So they have a Google Drive that they back up all their work through all the way from their freshman to senior year. And some kids are way more organized than others. I feel like I'm constantly saying like, organize your email, get in the habit of doing that now because it gets harder and harder the more you get. But then they back it up to their own personal email before they graduate and they have access to all that. That's what I love about the online portfolio, because that's theirs to take. Like they have access to that forever, so they can continually modify it, use it for whatever they need.
We do the same thing with any project. We will usually encourage the faculty member to have the student share that whatever outcome project with them so that they can back it up, so that when that student account goes away, it's their Google Drive doesn't disappear. We have had situations where that happened, but we do try to be intentional about that when we do workshops and when we work with faculty. We've kind of, from an IT perspective, we have been, I guess, I don't know what the word I want to use is, but suggested that we use Google just so that it's all in one space. We've had some issues with WordPress sites and having to host them, and then the bill doesn't get paid to pay the hosting, and then it disappears and things like that. So I don't love Google necessarily, but it tends to, it works for us, I guess, at this point in time. But yeah, that's definitely something you're constantly thinking about.
I would say it depends on the project and kind of what level of collaboration there is with the library, whether or not the library is going to keep things long term. For this text analysis one, there's not, for these workshops and with the materials, there's not like an end digital product that needs to be live online. So it's not something that I'm super worried about with this, but in working with classes on other projects, oftentimes they're using Esri story maps, which has its own like retention schedule through Esri with the university. The student can take the project with them when they graduate, or they can have it assigned to the faculty member or someone else on campus, and then it gets preserved long term. So it really depends on what platform a project's built on and kind of what the conversation has been with the faculty member or the students for project.
I have one more question for you, Lindsay, that kind of harkens back to our morning panel, because you mentioned like the emphasis on wanting students to grow connections, and then it was really apparent, I think, in your presentation, the sort of community-focused work that you're engaged in, and I wondered if you might talk a little bit about how you went about creating those community opportunities to get students involved and to give them these opportunities to show how their art can have an impact in the wider array of things.
I've been felt incredibly blessed growing up. I had a pretty great childhood, and my brother went into the Peace Corps, and we got to visit him while he was in the Peace Corps. And during that process, I realized that there are definitely people that don't have as much as we have. And I think that it is really imperative. Like I said, character is probably the most important thing about education, to teach our kids to be good human beings. I have a sign on my wall in my room that says, "Humankind, be both." And so that's kind of the premise, I think, that we need to underground almost everything that we do with our kids, because it will make the world a better place. And so I started off, I do art club, and so I integrated some of those things. I saw the memory project as an opportunity where we could connect with other students, like I said, and other people around the world. And then I wanted to bring it more locally. And so that's why I really love doing the hospice project too. We've done murals in places. When I taught at Southeast Webster Grand, we spent a summer painting a mural across from the grocery store. And my husband thought I was insane, but we did that. So I'm always looking for opportunities for kids to kind of connect beyond themselves, because kids can get really kind of just focused on themselves. And I think we talk a lot about social emotional learning too. And I actually think it would benefit them most if they started thinking about other people rather than just how am I feeling. Once you start thinking about other people and you start doing things for other people, magically they tend to feel a lot better about themselves. So I think it's a good thing to do. That answer the question?
Erin, you mentioned a student that I think was involved in podcasting and then went on to work in radio. And Lindsay, you've talked about some of the students' work that you were showing off, and you said like this kid's going places. I was wondering if you could both talk a little bit more about teaching transferable skills and the sorts of outcomes after the classroom and after graduation that your teaching experience can provide.
We had conferences last night. And so actually I had a mom come in that her son is graduating this year, but I had her daughter all 4 years, and she is now graduating from college, and she is still using her photography skills. So I think it's pretty awesome to hear those types of stories about how kids continually use the skills that they're learning. With art, I think it's awesome because if you ask anybody that's ever taken an art class, most of them still have maybe at least one project, or their parent has a project that they've done. So I think that's pretty awesome. And like I said, with the programs, no matter what program you expose them to, whenever they go into a job, just them knowing, hey, I learned this program, so I'm pretty sure I can learn this program, helps them build their confidence to realize that they can do something else.
think I haven't been in this position that long, so I don't know that I have a ton of other examples. I would say that when we see students that really excel in something, we tend to try to. Cornell is small enough that we will see them in the library or we will see them somewhere. So I try to engage with them and try to get them to come to the academic technology studio and like share with them what's going on. For instance, students that were interested in podcasting when we added that little 2-person podcasting space, I encourage them to come in. And we have students that do learn things outside of the classroom, outside of projects that faculty develop also. And so we just try to, they can make an appointment or they can reserve the space. So we try to teach as many people as much as we possibly can. But I would say Jack is probably my number one thing that I can think of. I'm sure there's something else and I'll remember it like right after I leave, but yeah.
Erin, what's the most unexpected recipe you found in a cookbook?
It's not a food recipe. Well, there's a lot of just unexpected, horrible food recipes, but I found a couple examples of something called a charcoal plant or a depression plant. And these are in some early, like 1930s cookbooks. And it's a charcoal briquette that you pour some combination of household cleaning materials over the top of, and they claim it grows a plant. I'm assuming it grows like crystals or something, like one of those crystal growing kits. But I was very shocked to find this just in the miscellaneous sections of these cookbooks. And I'm wondering where this came from, the idea of growing a plant and why it's called a depression plant. I'm not sure.
All right, if there's no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank all of our panelists, and I'm going to hand this over to Olivia to close things off.
Yeah, let's give the panelists one more round of applause. And thank you so much to everyone who spent the day with us or who just came for the afternoon even. It was really great to see all of you. I hope you'll keep in touch and stay tuned for next year. Safe travels if you have a ways to go back. And we still have some sweets back in the back and maybe some coffee and some drinks. So take something with you for the road. And thank you all. Hope you had a wonderful day.